Okay.
So, hi. I just want to give you a little rundown on my experience with the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission the last few years. It all began in March of 2007 when a Halifax Metro Transit bus driver wouldn't let me on the bus, using the excuse that the bus was too full. He shut the door and went on his way, but he didn't tell the other people that were standing at the bus stop that they couldn't get on. It was just me. And so I filed a complaint at that time. And then fast forward to a year later, in February of 2008, I encountered the same bus driver driving the number 6 bus at the same bus stop. And I got on the bus and he started hassling me about my wheelchair. And so I saw him twice that week in February of 2008. The second time, my son was with me, and my son heard the things this bus driver was saying to me about my wheelchair and not being able to transport my wheelchair on his bus. And when we showed this bus driver our bus passes, our university U-Pass bus passes, he looked at my son and he said, "I know who you are." It was kind of strange because my son had never seen this man before. The third time we saw the same bus driver was a week later, Monday morning, over at the same stop at Shabukdo Road. The bus driver pulled up. He didn't put down the ramp. He got off the bus. He circled my wheelchair, didn't say one word, got back on the bus, and one other person who was there at the bus stop with us got on the bus, but my son and I stood there basically in shock while this bus driver closed the door in our faces and drove away. So since 2008, I've waited very patiently for the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission to address these issues. I attended with my son a full-day mediation session with the mediator appointed by the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission. My son and I both went to this full-day session. HRM's lawyer was there, Mr. Kinghorn, and several Metro Transit managerial personnel who were there. And when I related to them the specifics of what happened to me, they just sat there with a blank look on their faces and basically had no response. Basically, I'd say they couldn't have cared less. And so after this full-day mediation session, Mr. Dewar, who was the mediator with the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission, he contacted Mr. Kinghorn several times over the next 5-6 months, asking him, what was their response, how did they want to resolve it, and every time they just basically stalled, didn't answer, just ignored Mr. Dewar's attempts to contact them. Finally, at long last, in November of 2010, Mr. Desmond at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission started doing an investigation into the whole matter. He finalized his investigative report in April of 2011, and in his investigative report, he recommended that there was enough evidence to send the matter to a human rights tribunal. So his report was sent to me and also to Metro Transit, and we opportunity to respond to Mr. Desmond's investigative report, which I did in May of 2011, a couple of months ago. And Mr. Kinghorn, who is HRM's lawyer, sent in a 7-page response, just laden with legal arguments and asking Mr. Ernie Bolivar, who's the chair of the board of the panel of commissioners, to dismiss my complaint, that it had no merit. So the commissioners had their meeting on June 23rd, 2011, and for reasons that are unknown to me, they decided to dismiss my complaint. And when I talked to Mr. Gerald Hashie, who is the conflict resolution officer at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission, and I expressed my shock and dismay, he tried to depict this as somehow two other persons unknown to me who had similarly made complaints about Metro Transit. He tried to convey this to me, that somehow my complaint was covered under the complaints of these two strangers that I had never met before and who I had absolutely no knowledge about. So I would just like to set the record straight, because Mr. Hashie made a public statement in the Chronicle Herald to the effect that 99% of my complaint, he said, was covered under the complaints of these two other people. That is simply untrue. My complaint has not been dealt with. It has been dismissed for reasons that have not been explained to me by the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission. And as a result of my experience this past 4 years, I'd like to just put out there to the public that if you're a person with a disability, don't even bother going to the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission unless you've got a dozen witnesses to what has happened to you. And furthermore, if you have a complaint against a government body, or be it provincial, federal, or in my case, municipal government body, don't even bother wasting your time, because they will have their legal team there at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission, leveraging all of their resources, manipulating, misleading, intimidating, bluffing, going through bogus mediation sessions that lead absolutely nowhere. I'm not aware of anything, quite frankly, that the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission has done to promote the rights of people with disabilities in Nova Scotia. And finally, I'd just like to comment that the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission put out a press release in July depicting that they have cooperated with Metro Transit in making all these wonderful improvements for people with disabilities using Metro Transit. So let's be clear. One of the improvements that they said was going to take place is the clearing of snow at Monkford Terminal. Well, isn't that what they're supposed to be doing in the first place? Do we have to go to a Human Rights Commission to get them to clear snow for the public? And as for people with disabilities being able to have their attendants travel with them free of charge on the bus, I don't want to be a cynic, but most large cities in Canada already have those provisions for people with disabilities. So don't be misled by the posturing of HRM trying to depict that there's suddenly these champions of people with disabilities, because it's simply not true. When my investigative report was finalized, the lawyer for Metro Transit and HRM, Mr. Randolph Kinghorn, did absolutely everything in his power to discredit my complaint, to have my complaint dismissed. They couldn't have cared less that their bus driver treated me like a piece of dirt. So the public really shouldn't be lulled into believing that Metro Transit is now suddenly this champion of people with disabilities. All they're doing is making improvements that should already be there in the first place in the case of clearing snow. And as for letting attendants travel with people with disabilities, well, that's already in place in other cities in Canada. So you shouldn't have to file human rights complaints and wait for years and years to get these things resolved in order to get what ought to be there in the first place. So Mr. Kinghorn, if you're watching my video, have a nice day, and stop pretending that HRM gives a hoot about people with disabilities. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.